Mortal Kombat 11 is coming. What's up, dudes? Max here, and we are on the cusp of Video Game Christmas 2018. E3 is just around the corner, and with it, a whole bunch of announcements and a whole bunch of games I'm seriously looking forward to, two of which have already been announced. Soul Calibur 6 we're going to finally get to see more of, as well as Super Smash Bros. On the Switch. But there's another game that is inevitable, another game that everyone's anticipating, and another game that, based on all the evidence of the past near decade, lines up to becoming true. A small nudge of information that came from Ed Boon that sort of sparked everyone's imagination of the next Mortal Kombat. I can tell you right now, based on, well, the history of NetherRealm Studios games, this is absolutely the case. NetherRealm Studios has this interesting track record between releasing a Mortal Kombat title, an Injustice title, and then another Mortal Kombat title, all within about 2 years of each other. Now, the interesting thing is that every single E3, there's always a gap of nothing that NetherRealm Studios has, and then at the next E3, they either show something for Injustice, like a CG trailer, they show something for Mortal Kombat, like a CG trailer, and then eventually at the show behind closed doors, or in some fashion, you get to see a little bit of gameplay of their next big game. And E3 2018 falls perfectly within that time frame. So my guess is that somewhere going up into the date of E3, we're gonna have something that'll be shown for Mortal Kombat 11. Most likely a CG trailer. The last one we saw was the first debut trailer for MKX, which was that Scorpion versus Sub-Zero fight we saw in the forest, which was really cool and also gives a bunch of nods in terms of how the gameplay was sort of an evolution of MK9 as well as Injustice going into MKX. And that's the biggest concern I have. But for all you guys that are like wondering how much of a possibility this is, I'd probably give it in the range of like 99%. They have stuck to this plan for the past very long while. And while some people were curious whether or not Injustice 2 was going to be happening when it did get announced right after that and ultimately became the game that came out when we thought it would. So MK11 is a high probability at E3 this year, and being the technical sequel to one of the biggest fighting games ever out there, as well as one of my personal favorite Mortal Kombat games, I'm really curious what direction they're going to take this thing. I love Mortal Kombat X, and I like a lot of things to be carried over from that game, especially considering that so many aspects of the gameplay. I love a lot of its characters. We made a ton of videos and like 3 movies regarding it. It was just so much fun to be a part of the huge Mortal Kombat X hype train that was that entire game. And it showed, man. That game sold ridiculously well, probably better than most fighting games have in a very, very long time. However, not everyone loved MKX. There are certain aspects of the gameplay, certain aspects of the roster that absolutely could have been improved upon that many people do gripe on the game, mostly when you compare it to a game like Mortal Kombat 9. Really, in the pantheon of Mortal Kombat games, a lot of people hold MK9 in a very, very, very high regard. There are aspects of MKX that I really, really enjoyed, especially the story mode. It had a much different look and feel, as well as different things like the living towers that were able to get updated, and you got different crazy living towers that gave you unique things with holidays. I all thought that was really fun. But other big things like the infamous Challenge Tower 300 was missing from the game, and a lot of people still consider MK9 story mode to be the toppest-tierest story mode of them all. And I kind of want to go back and revisit those at some point before Mortal Kombat 11's release, eventual announcement, anything, because I forgot a lot about what happened in MK9, and I only remember a bit of what happened technically in MKX, and I kind of want to revisit those events once again because the story modes are huge for these games. Injustice 2 probably has NetherRealm Studios' best story mode in my opinion, but people still really think that MK9 is the top tier in terms of recent Mortal Kombat games, and I can absolutely understand why. The roster in that game is dream come true material. Almost every single character a fan could possibly want from Mortal Kombat was there. Outside of some of the more obscure MK characters that technically showed up between the PlayStation 2 era, all the way to the Wii era, to Mortal Kombat Armageddon. Technically, MK Armageddon has the best roster of them all, but really the Mortal Kombat 9 characters have so much more identity and character and finishers and everything when you compare it to the PlayStation 2 era of Mortal Kombat characters. What I'm trying to say is the things I'm looking forward to MKX definitely is an improvement to the roster. While there is one of the teenagers in the game that was the main highlight of the entire roster, was Takeda, and I really did dig Takeda and ended up being my main character of the game. The other aspects, like the guest characters, were a really good call in some ways, and in other ways were kind of interesting with like Leatherface. I know some people were really excited about some of the guests, especially myself. But a lot of that roster was very lackluster, and it took all the way until the second combat pack for us to eventually get the cyborgs back and Smoke and everything else like that, which really did help, but it took some time. The biggest question I got going forward is that in Injustice 2, we saw an interesting development. they took a lot of what made characters from Injustice 1 and sort of fashioned them to Injustice 2, making that roster really damn huge. There is a ton of characters in Injustice 2, and even though it's not my personal favorite fighting game of all of them, it is extremely well crafted, it looks damn amazing, and offers a huge amount of variety in terms of that character roster. But they did take a lot from that Injustice 1. Batman kind of was like Batman, Superman was kind of like Superman, Green Lantern carried some things over, Flash carried some things over, etc. A big part of the roster was able to be as big as it was because they did not have to remake the characters completely. Bringing over animations and certain attacks that were kind of carried over from previous games. I'm curious if Mortal Kombat 11 is going to do the same thing. Mortal Kombat X already established a foundation of its characters and remade animations from Mortal Kombat 9. Mortal Kombat 9's characters play and look kind of a lot different than MKX does, so I'm wondering how much of this game is going to be brand new. How much of this game is going to be a continuation of Mortal Kombat X, if anything at all. And there are aspects of MKX I really enjoyed. I thought bringing the run back was a great idea. Focused on the game's rushdown mechanics, characters had a lot of different rushdown attacks, people were always in your face, and it made Mortal Kombat X kind of fun. But certain things like overhead lows, low overheads, and things like that made it very hard to block certain attacks, especially online. But they eventually fixed the online, which made it ultimately a lot easier to defend against that stuff. We all know the online is going to be carrying over into Mortal Kombat 11. We all know the things that were improved upon in Injustice 2 most likely are going to make their way to MK11. The gear system in Injustice 2 was huge, giving characters the ability to customize moves as well as looks, and making your hero or your character look completely different than anybody else's character. However, there were certain gripes I had with it. I did not like the fact that certain special moves were attached to it. It sort of felt like them taking the variation system and splitting it up and not really giving you access to everything except random boxes. While the variation system, while I did enjoy it, did split the characters into 3 different paths, and for a lot of characters, there was just one that was really good and the other ones that were kind of weird. They did eventually fix this through balancing, but from what I hear from a lot of people, they didn't like the variation system too much, even though I really loved it. If they were not to do the variation system in a game like Mortal Kombat 11, that could potentially open up the roster for a lot more. The workload that would normally go into characters to make move sets to accommodate 3 different variations wouldn't have to be done anymore. You just focus on one character, give them a couple more moves, or just make them focus on being the one character, and instead make a bigger roster with more characters. And I'm okay with that trade-off. While I would prefer it to stay and get a big roster and everything included, I don't think that's a possibility because these games do essentially come out every 2 years or so. It is a limited time development. And NetherRealm Studios is huge now after the crazy developments of Injustice 2 and MKX and those games being as big as they are. They got a lot of people to work on these games. However, it might just be asking a bit too much for a giant roster bigger than Mortal Kombat X, as well as the variation system, but I'm okay with that trade-off if we get more characters. But the big question is the gear system from Injustice 2. I'd imagine a lot of people are going to want something like that back, and the retention the gear system brought to Injustice 2 is huge. The fact that casual players were playing a ton in those matches that made the gear and the stats modify everything, that's kind of the thing I want to go away. I really did not like the fact that gear and stats went into online play, where someone's max level gear could just make mincemeat of some poor person's gear that they just randomly haven't gotten yet. The act of getting gear and special moves for characters really turned me off with some parts of Injustice 2, even though the customization aspect, making things look cool, was really friggin' awesome. That's the thing I want to come back. I want to make custom characters in Mortal Kombat 11, but not have that stat modifier, or at least make it that you don't have to worry about a random thing giving it to you. I do think that that casual aspect of the game is going to be huge. I do think the gear system was definitely more alluring for an audience over something like the variation system. And customizing characters is big in a lot of fighting games, especially for a casual audience, and MKX caters huge to the casual audience in general. So let's bring something like that back. I do hope that that stuff returns. I hope a lot of gameplay mechanics from something like Mortal Kombat X returns, like the running. But the larger, bigger question is something from Mortal Kombat 9 making a return that didn't really get a lot of traction when it came out, but several fighting games nowadays have been kind of picking up the pace, and it's tag mechanics. Tag mechanics are huge in a lot of dominant fighting games now. Dragon Ball FighterZ is a 3v3 game that largely takes off the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Marvel vs. Capcom changing a lot of its mechanics. BlazBlue Cross Tag, it seems to be the year of tag fighting games, which is great for me because I love tag fighting games. But are they going to bring something like that back? That's a big question I have, and I don't know. I would love to see it implemented in a bit of a different way than Mortal Kombat 9. But if they just give you really cool looking team up attacks with certain characters, I think that could be the sickest Mortal Kombat game if that is a thing they take advantage of. But I don't know. I don't want to make any presumptions on that one, but I do think that things like the run button are going to make a return from MKX. I do think something like the gear system is going to be returning in Mortal Kombat 11. And I do feel that most likely the variation system is going to be left by the wayside, hopefully for more characters and a bigger roster in Mortal Kombat 11. And the bigger question along that is, what's the game going to look like? Are we going to get a bright, colorful, gory universe that was Mortal Kombat 9? Or are we going to get a darker, more subtle tone to Mortal Kombat X's very, very specific color palettes that it used? Mortal Kombat X isn't devoid of color by any means, but it's definitely not as saturated as its previous games, and the visual style is something I'm also really curious about. And I hope it's something in between. I hope we get a dark, gritty game that doesn't take itself too seriously, kind of like Mortal Kombat 9, but also lets you do ridiculous stuff. I kind of love seeing things like friendships and love seeing babalities and weird stuff like that, and it was always bizarre to me that we didn't have toasties in MKX as well, so who knows? There's a lot of stuff I want from Mortal Kombat 11. There's a lot of stuff that Mortal Kombat X did so well, like brutalities, and I could go on forever. But I think that's left for future videos when we finally see what the heck the game is like and we can start making requests and really, really boiling it down to see what's actually going to be in MK11, because, to be frank, it's not even announced yet. There's not even a game. This is just excitement on my end that we're right around that perfect time frame for Mortal Kombat to make a return, and I am damn excited. As always, dudes, thank you a ton for watching. What do you want to see show up in Mortal Kombat 11 when it eventually does get announced, hopefully within the next 3 weeks or so? Is it tag systems? Is it gear systems? Is it variations? Is it run buttons? Let me know your favorite aspects of the recent Mortal Kombat, and hopefully we can get a good idea of what the hell people are looking forward to. I'll be doing my best to cover everything that's announced, as well as going back to Mortal Kombat X recently because I've been itching it really bad to play some Predator and Smoke and Takeda. Thank you a ton, dudes. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.